this idea of rage can take you to so many good places if you use it in the right way. And it gives you that point of difference, because often, I think there are always like three sort of levels when you start a business. You can either be 10 to 20% better, or say, for example, however you measure that, but say 10, 20% better than what's out there already. If you've got a cup, you want to make a cup that's 10, 20% better, that's fine. Anybody can do that. You don't really need rage. But what rage can do for you is it can make a product 10 times better, not just 10%, but 10 times better. Or you can even take it even further than that. And I think that's what's really nice, because it gives you real standout, because it's really hard to be different as well. But you can either be really different at a functional product level, or you can just say things differently about the same topic. And I think either of those work very well.
So you're a smart business committed to innovation, to service and to modern marketing, and you're asking, what's next? Wondering how you can become even more innovative. My name is Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and this is the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Hi innovators, it's great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. I also hope you enjoyed our most recent interviews with Joya Das and Oscar Trimboli. Isn't it a privilege to have these wonderful guests on our InnovaBuzz podcast week after week? And today is no exception either. I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, Simon Lamey, the chief brain at the Brain Wheel. And he's also the author of The Science of Getting Chosen, which is a book about modern marketing. Simon has helped over 200 businesses get chosen consistently by their customers using his 5-stage marketing system that is based on the latest in marketing science and consumer psychology. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transformational Marketing Hub, where you'll find a host of free and exceptionally useful information to help transform your marketing. You can access the Transformational Marketing Hub by visiting innovabiz.co/VIP. If you don't yet have an account, don't worry, click on the blue Take a Peek Inside button and check it out. As I said, it's free and exceptionally useful. In our discussion today, Simon talked to me about his 5-stage marketing system, which is based on the growth phases of the Teoko tree, which is an astounding 9,550 years old. We talked about how rage and the desire to change something for the better can lead to a standout business. And we talked about the extremely attractive customer and the importance of talking to your customers. Without further ado, then let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Simon Lamey. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited today to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, all the way from Tonbridge in the UK, Simon Lamey. Simon is the chief brain at the Brain Wheel, so that's an interesting title. He's also the author of The Science of Getting Chosen, which is a book about modern marketing that describes how to have the customer choose you over your competition. So I'm really fascinated by that whole concept. So welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Simon. It's a real privilege to have you as a guest.
Well, likewise, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's really great. So I know it's the morning time with me and the evening with you. So it's really good to be doing this from the other side of the world. Yeah.
That's right. It's always fun to have people from all around the world on, and it's great to be able to do that these days with the internet and the power of communication through the internet. So you've got your two latest books are The Science of Getting Chosen, which I've mentioned, and No Ugly Duckling, How to Transform an Unsexy Product on Instagram and Sell, which sounds fascinating as well. I haven't looked at that one yet. You also run a marketing consultancy and courses, and with all of that, you've helped over 200 businesses get chosen consistently by their customers. Now, what fascinates me is that your marketing system is very much that, a system. It's a 5-stage system based on the latest in marketing science and consumer psychology. And of course, as a marketer myself, I'm really excited to dig deeper into that with you today. But before we start talking about all things marketing, marketing science and marketing process, let's find out a little bit more about your background. How did you get to where you are today, and what were some of the pivotal moments in that journey?
That's a very, very good question. Well, it started back in about 2005 when I actually, I was going to go and do law of all things, and actually I thought it might be a bit boring. So I ended up going to work for Saatchi & Saatchi advertising agency, and very quickly I was quite attracted to what's called strategic planning or account planning, where you're doing all the thinking and the customer research. And I ended up working for a long time about 3 or 4 years. In my world, that's a long time, but about doing quite a few hundred hours worth of focus groups and depth interviews in market research, just going out and talking to customers. And for me, that was probably, to use the word pivotal, I think that was really one of the most pivotal times, because especially recently, people forget to talk about go and actually see and speak to their customers. And
yeah.
What is it they think? We're not. I know I'm all fan of split tests and A/B testing and everything like that. But the qualitative side, the why, talking to a human being, it's really important. So that was very pivotal moments, and I'll probably come on to a bit why I think that's so later on. But I mean, after that, I worked a lot and worked for various marketing agencies especially when websites and Twitter and was really taking off around 2008-9ish, and spent a lot of time in a while in events strategy as well. So I've really done the whole thing. So everything from sort of TV, online, digital, social media, and then I decided to go off on my own as well. But I think that customer insight part has always sort of stayed with me. So now I focus on businesses who tend to have marketing teams of about 1 person to 3 people. So that's either a small business owner or somebody who owns a business and delegates to 1 or 2 others in a marketing team. And that's where I really, really focus nowadays. But it always comes back to, who is your customer, and actually going and talking to them, or a number of them.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I'm always amazed, because often I hear people say, "Gee, that's sort of innovative. We'll go and talk to the customer." I say, "Well, yeah, where did we forget that part?"
Yeah.
When did that become innovative? I thought that was sort of core principle.
Well, I know. I mean, I genuinely think that the best copywriting is done when you go and get those words and those phrases, the most emotive ones from customers as well. Because we're not very, but unless of course you're skilled and you've worked in copywriting your life. But if you haven't and you don't have the resource or the time, actually, you get these most wonderful words and phrases from a customer. And I go to a few awards or best practice evenings where up in London, so you hear case studies of companies who've done very well, and often what happens is happens quite often is somebody says, "We spent all this money, coming up with a campaign and doing this research and a lot of time thinking, but there was this one person in one focus group in this one random part of the country who said this phrase, and then it completely changed the way we thought." And it just shows that in spite of all the money and thinking you might throw at it from professional marketers, of course that's important, but you can't do without speaking to the customer, because they've got stuff in their heads that you can't necessarily imagine. And it's sort of verging on arrogance sometimes if you think you can do better, and sometimes people just think, "I've got to rush stuff out." So yeah, it's been using that word pivotal. That's a good word. That was a sort of a pivotal part of my past. Yeah.
All right. Now, in the foreword of the book about marketing, The Science of Getting Chosen, you state that a lot of marketing advice stinks right now, and that's quite a provocative statement. So, what's wrong with marketing today?
Well, I mean, first of all, it said it's got to be said there are a lot of obviously very credible, good people out there as well. So, but I think there's a lot of what I call the fame-seeking marketers out there who are I don't want to name any names because it's not fair enough to have cult followings, but they'll sort of tell you to push out lots and lots of content, just keep going, pushing content. But is one big example. And I've spent a lot of time looking at proper marketing science run by universities. You've got a great one in Australia. You might well have heard of it, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, and there's one up in one in London called the Institute for Practitioners of Advertising, and the Account Planning Group. And these people use hard sort of statistics and data. There's a guy called Mark Ritson who's also in Australia, he's one wonderful chap. And there's this real movement now to say that there is a real science, and you've got years and decades worth of data to look back on to see why is it that people buy, why don't they buy. And it's really flying in the face of a number of things that are being said. So one thing that is really interesting at the moment for me is that I was reading a report by Nielsen, so they're a big market research agency up here, and they looked into 450 brands who launched on social media, so who sold their products and services on social media, and they actually found that there's only a very weak link, about 1% to 3% correlation between people who actually click, like, share, or comment on your social media ad and actually end up buying it. And everyone thinks that engagement is the number one thing. You always get likes, comments, and shares, and that's success. But no, but what success is that isn't actually linked to engagement. It's a very, very weak link. And there was a separate case study that showed that I haven't got the names to hand, but I can certainly pinpoint it out. But there's a 90% of people who bought this product or service hadn't actually clicked, liked, comment, or shared any of the posts during the social media campaign. So it's something that's come up a lot, and we can get it in our own. When we scroll through, I don't know, say somebody's LinkedIn feed, and you see that it's pretty much the same number of likes, the same number of people liking it as well, and which is fine. But when you're trying to grow a business, you need big reach. You need to reach a lot of people, and this myth of organically engaging with people is a misnomer. It's what's really needed is to reach a lot of people consistently over time, and often that means paid for advertising, means great PR, and of course very strong message and creative behind it. But I just think that message has been lost recently, and the data's really, the science is really there. Galileo was in trouble many centuries ago for saying how our solar system worked. And I think the same thing's happening now. We've had people prescribing, leeches for ailments and cures, but actually, there's stuff out, there's real science saying actually, a better cure is probably to take a paracetamol instead. So yes, that's really where I've come from, and it comes from my background working in agencies in London.
You touched on a couple of points there, and I think the idea of getting more likes and measuring engagement by that way, to me, is missing the mark somewhat, because I think, when people talk about engagement, I like to interpret that as building a relationship. So, in the olden days when we didn't have computer and we didn't have social media, you build relationships with people, and once you got to know somebody and got to like them and trust them, the old know, like, trust equation, then you might buy their product or do business with them. And I think today the technology is different. The platform that we use to make those connections might be a little different, but the principle really is just the same. And I like to call things like measuring likes or measuring even podcast downloads as vanity metrics, because it says more about making your ego feel good rather than delivering results.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. Maybe people about maybe slightly more concerned with being popular than than seeking profits, which of course you want enough profit anyway to have a nice enough living. So and there may or may not be a correlation between the two, but I suspect that whatever correlation there is might just be incidental. Yeah, I think you're quite right. I mean, I do use social media. Gosh, I've even written a book about Instagram. So, I've worked for very big brands on it. On social media as well. So you do get to see some really good examples. how it works. I mean, there are some really good examples of why paid for advertising does work on a small business scale. I mean, if you look at what I call the get rich quick sort of sellers out there, the sort of people who promise, a lot of money within a few weeks, and but you pay something like, I don't know, $10,000-$15,000 or whatever for their course. Their copy is superb. I mean, it's extremely persuasive, high pressure copy, and they always have the countdown timers, and then the pushy sales call at the end. And that sort of paid for advertising, the short term stuff works. I mean, my slight problem with that is that it's because it's so short term. It's again, going back to the science, short term sales activation works. It was great ROI, but actually, you can get great ROI, but sales over the long term can decrease. Just because you do one short campaign, your ROI can still be good, but your sales can still decrease over the long term. So it's not really brand building work. Yeah.
And I wonder about that sometimes. I don't know if you have any information whether there's data around how, what sort of response you get from that sort of thing. Because to me, I see that kind of approach and I think, it's so formulaic now. Everybody seems to use it. They say there must be a rule book or a guidebook somewhere that says these are the steps you do. And when I see that now, the message is kind of lost on me because I look at the process and say, here's another one that's following this sort of system.
For me, it comes down to personal taste. I don't like that. It's not my style. I would much, as you were talking, saying earlier about Jürgen, was that, it's nice to build relationships over time and feel you actually have a genuine connection. And you tend to build long-term customers over that, doing it that route. It might be slower, but it's more sustainable. But I think, I spoke to, I've got a great contact who lives in Italy. He's very good selling a lot of online courses, and he does paid for advertising. And, he said he gets his customers expect results now. And he said, we all know the truth is that it takes years of, years of hardship, and nobody when they click on an ad wants to hear that. But he said that is the truth. But the problem is you get the customers you get from that, the people who want the very, the instant results, the magic bullet. Those are the ones who are going to be more difficult and probably going to be disappointed. And I don't know if they're the sort of customer I'd like for the long run. I'd like somebody who is up for, some very good direction, but also realizes that, it's hard, and the effort's got to be good. And funnily enough, I did an exam. I did a sort of a test sales call on one of these, what I call the get rich quick schemes out there, and they do seem to have a consistent thing: is that you've got to have money for paid for advertising. You've got to have a good idea as well, and they'll give you the information to get you there, which all suggests that if you've got a good idea and you've got some money, then you might as well go and do it yourself.
Yeah, so. That's right. And there might be smarter ways to do it even then.
Exactly. So, it probably makes my job, maybe yours as well, Jürgen, a little harder, that you have to persuade people that there isn't a silver bullet. It is hard work, but you can get some very sound direction on the way, which is obviously, why we're here. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you said there around longer term and picking the right customers and building those relationships, because your 5-stage system is based on the metaphor of the Chico. Is it the Chico tree or Tico tree? How do you pronounce it?
Choko tree. Yeah.
Choko tree. Okay. So, well, talk us through that, but I'll just mention that it's a Scandinavian tree, which is 9,550 years old. So that's quite amazing.
It is. It was. It all started really. The science of getting chosen system was. There's a Chinese proverb which says, if you want a tree to go far, if you want a tree to grow fast, you've got to have fantastically stable roots, or something a bit slightly more poetic than that. Mm-hmm. But that was the idea, and I found this. I was trying to find an analogy that sort of worked for this sort of 5-stage system, and then I came across this 9,550-year-old tree that's based in Scandinavia, and it's even though it's shrunken, it was a bush at one point. It was a tree, but its roots have always been incredibly strong. And for me, the main part of the system really is the first 5 stages is that, sorry, the first 3 of the 5 stages is the main part, because the first one is, you've got to work out why you're doing it. And when you know why, which is the first stage, that's the first proper route. I call it your fuel, because, when you start a business, you don't often think about the customer. It's quite a selfish endeavor starting a business in many ways. I think in the end, it doesn't become a selfish thing because you're giving more and more to people. But at the start, it's all about you and what you want to change, and probably maybe wanting to have own your own destiny. But when you start to think out, why do I want to do this and what do I want to change? You see something that's wrong in the marketplace. And this is probably before you've even spoken to a customer. But that's the fuel that gets you out of bed in the morning at, silly o'clock. I mean, I call silly o'clock about 5 o'clock, which is most mornings when 4 or 5 out of 5 working days I get up. And but you've got something you want to change, and then you can have a unique position for your business based on that fuel. So that's kind of, for me, that's like the first route. And it did remind me of the sort of the roots of this tree, this very old tree might have as well. And then, of course, you need to have a customer route and really understanding. I call it an extremely attractive customer. So, people tend to have your audience, and then you have segments, but people have personas. I think a user image is another way of calling it. So somebody who's an ideal customer who represents your whole segment. And I try to find one person who represents that. I'll interview a number of people, but I'll find one person who I think, that's the person who, in my mind, represents that. Harley Davidson have that hairy biker image, don't they? They've got that, but it's very handy when you have that person in mind.
Absolutely.
And, so that's the second one, is the custom one. Then you go and you develop your product, and which is the other route, and the process for doing that through testing and research. So the third or fourth, I think I'm on the 4th of the final route. Yes, is actually your brand, and I think the brand one's the most interesting, because when you look at, I was talking about the science earlier on, the marketing science agencies. Or universities, the one in Australia, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. It sounds like a really dull name, and I appreciate for a podcast that's not the most jazzy of names, but they're a most amazing place. And they've shown that what they call it, the jargon term is distinctive assets, which means if you've got something in your design, like a logo or a jingle, or colors and fonts, if you keep, or catchphrases or slogans, if you keep repeating those, they're called assets, those distinctive assets that are just particular to your brand again and again and again, those things really stick in people's minds. So when people come to buying from you, they shortcut to your brand, and they really help build memory structures and memories in your head, little connections of neurons. And that sounds very very scientific, and it's not really. I mean, if you keep consistently saying the same thing to the same people again and again, that's what will help people think of you when they're ready to buy. Because, especially in the services game and consultancy, people aren't always ready to buy. It takes them, you might know somebody for 2-3 years before they say, could you come and work with me? That's right. Yeah. You need to be consistent in how you say things and what you look like. And that's the really important thing I'm finding about branding at the moment. That's the final of the brand routes. So yes, so I feel like I'm on a slight tangent, but it is based around it all. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating, because there's kind of the 3 different aspects there with the roots that you're putting at that level, which is the brand, the customer, and the product. And it's certainly the repetition there is an important thing. And I like that you said, keep it in front of mind, because often people aren't ready to buy right now. But that doesn't mean to say that's not a no, that's just a no for today, which one of my other guests said for a little while. The philosophy of a no is just a no for today. So taking that idea means you've got to stay front of mind.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the biggest challenges, especially when, for myself, it's not trying to spread yourself too thin. So, I mean, how many channels can you possibly manage when you've got a very small marketing team? Which it's me, it's my wife. My wife is funny enough, she's due twins in about 2 months. So it's going to be me, and obviously I've got to push
a little bit of a change. Is that first children?
They're going to be second. So we got to buy one get one free with a second. It's going to change things a lot. So, I've got I've recorded, I've got my podcast, which is ready. I've got the first 4 episodes ready to go. And then I realized that it's not sustainable right now, because I thought, when we go down to one person, how am I going to be able to spend, my podcast is actually me talking into a microphone with a bit of music and a bit of, breaks and sound effects. And it takes me about 8 to 10 hours to write down a script of about 3,000 words for about 25-minute episode, and to get the sound effects on there. And I could pay somebody to do it, I suppose, but I like being in control and having the skill myself. So, and I thought, well, on top of events and on top of, emails and trying to get some PR out there as well, I thought I won't have the time. And it really pains me to say so. But if you're trying to keep in front of people's minds, the idea of being there consistently means probably selecting, especially if you're small, fewer channels, but doing those fewer channels really well. But, and I know that goes in the face of few people out there who might say that, you need to be on all the channels posting all the time. I've had that advice given to me. I did smile wryly, because I thought, how would I see my wife? If you have to be very focused and do the few channels extremely well. And I think that's the way to help yourself be consistent. But if you're spreading yourself across a number of media channels just because they're there, I think it's, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, and one of the routes you mentioned was the customer route, and you talked to us about the persona. And I like that your system. I mean, we do the same. We basically have one person. Now, it might be a little bit of an imaginary person. I say that sometimes it'll be a clone of maybe 2 or 3 of your best customers. That's a good one to put together. But then having a picture in your mind of the person makes it so much easier, and that helps you determine, which channels are they likely to hang out and where you're likely to find them or be able to engage with them.
That's a great shout. When I worked at a number of agencies, where there was advertising agencies up in London, there's actually one person who I met who said they have what's called a media target, which is sort of like a persona description of somebody, where it might be an amalgamation of a few people, and where they hang out online, or whether it's online, where it's offline, how they think or behave. But then they have what's something called a creative target, which is probably where I'm coming from with the extremely attractive customers. When it comes to writing sales copy, or when it comes to, so for example, on the sales page for the Science of Getting Chosen, it's based on one interview with one person. Because he's the person I wanted to write that sales page for. But his problem is shared by other people. It's one big relatable problem, which is about the problem with scattergun marketing advice. And I was sitting there, and he said, I've just got this big problem with all this scattergun marketing advice out there. He said, which is the right one? How do I stitch it all together? And he was talking, and that was kind of the angle I was coming from. But just because he's my sort of creative target, he's my extremely attractive customer, it doesn't mean that in terms of media, if I, putting paid advertising spend behind it, it would be, small business owners, 1 to 3 people who live in say Australia, United States, and the UK. Those would be 2 different ones. But I like, I suppose, with a system about having you go from a target audience to a smaller segment to one person, and when you get to that one person, you get to the point where you can start creating the copy for your website. And that's exactly. Then takes you into stage 3.
Yeah. But I like how you've outlined that, because I call it your ideal client. So in a way, it's a construct of that one person you've got, your wish client. But I like what you said there in terms of that, when you do your marketing or your advertising, you're going to spread it wider than that. And also, one of the things I find is people are resistant to this idea of documenting that or getting really clear about that ideal client or that target, because they feel, but I'm going to miss out on these other people. I say, no, that's exactly what you just said, Simon. This is who you write your website for. This is who you write your blog posts for, and your advertising might be a little broader than that. But then, if somebody else comes along and says, I'd like your help with my marketing, or I'd like your help with whatever service it might be, there's no rule that says because they don't fit that profile, you can't take them. You still have the choice. You can still choose to take them on board or not.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I think I like that terminology as well, because when you think about one person, or an extremely attractive customer or something like that, you actually, what you end up with is, I call it it's a big relatable problem. When I used to work writing advertising briefs or for creative teams, they want one big relatable problem, which might come from one person, but that one person might use one phrase, but what happens is that everybody else can see themselves in that phrase they use, which is they then get attracted to that phrase. It used to be called the universal human truth, or some jargon, but but the idea is that when you find somebody who really has an issue, really has a problem, is suffering from something, or really urgently needs a product that you've got, they feel that real pain. They're going to come out with some most extraordinary, language, emotive language that you can just capture and use yourself, and choose what to put as a headline and choose what to put as under your offer as well. And it's just all there for the taking. You just need a conversation, and that's all it is.
And one of the things you said, I don't know whether it's in the book or on your website somewhere, that without rage, the desire to change something for the better isn't there, or a business can't stand out if they don't sort of show that emotion that you talked about. Yeah,
I think that's a very good point. Thanks for reminding me about the rage, because actually that is the best place to start. I mean, because I think if you just want to go into business to make money, to sell something, it's very difficult to be much better. But when you feel really angry about the way something's done, and you think, this has to change, and you can do some really good stuff. I mean, I always love, there's Casper mattresses out there who they completely change the model about how people get mattresses delivered to their home, and you can return it. You don't have to go to a shop and look around. You have to look at people like up in the UK, Anita Roddick with a Body Shop. She was angry about sort of the ethical testing that was done on animals in the beauty product, but that was her rage. That was there's a Steve Jobs example I think I used in the book, where the guy has where the Microsoft exec was bragging about his new stylus and phone, and actually what Steve Jobs did was he came back to the office and just said he was so cross that he decided to make the iPhone from it. It was just this idea of rage can take you to so many good places if you use it in the right way, and it gives you that point of difference, because often, I think there are always three sort of levels when you start a business. You can either be 10 to 20% better, or say, for example, how do you measure that, but say 10-20% better than what's out there already. If you've got a cup, you want to make a cup that's 10-20% better, that's fine. Anybody can do that. You don't really need rage. But what rage can do for you is it can make a product 10 times better, not just 10%, but 10 times better. Or you can even take it even further than that. And I think that's what's really nice, because it gives you real standout, because it's really hard to be different as well. But you can either be really different at a functional product level, or you can just say things differently about the same topic, and I think either of those work very well.
Yeah, what I particularly like about that, though, is that a lot of people say, well, how do you get an idea for a product or business? And if you think about your everyday kind of existence, there's probably several times during the day where something annoys you. And if there's something there that's coming up repeatedly, and there's no solution for that around, there's an idea.
Yeah.
So I love the rage. They're looking at it through that angle of rage. Every time you get angry, ask yourself, well, is there something that can fix that issue? What's the real problem? Is there something that can fix that? If not, can I build something?
Absolutely. And and then I tend to find that when you start with that, you can then maybe a couple of other sins, and I'm sort of maybe getting a bit Catholic here and talking about church and sinning, but you are, I suppose the other one is that your competition then become envious, so you go from your own rage and then you think, well, this will make the competition envious as well. And you sort of get these little signals that you think, well, maybe this is starting to be something that could be quite interesting and it's got commercial potential. But then you go out and of course then you've got to test it with your audience and the painstaking process of just getting something live. and then marketing it beyond that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, we've covered the fuel and the route, so we've still got 3 sections to go. So talk us through those.
Well, these sections are really good. You can't get onto like one can't get onto sections sort of stages 3, 4, and 5 until you've got the first ones, because like a typewriter, if you jump straight to thinking I've got a business idea and I'm going to start posting on Facebook about it, you'll soon come straight back to the start thinking, why am I doing this, to your fuel route, if you haven't got those in place, because people will say, well, what on earth is this person talking about? And it is very tempting for people to think they've got an idea and they're just going to start posting about it. But the third stage is once you've got all these things lined up, why you're unique, what your problem you're solving is, what your offer is, your solution, and you've tested it as well. You've then got this wonderful, you can then have all the ingredients you need to form a very solid trunk that suddenly appears above the surface of the ground, and everything's happened underneath the surface, and the world probably hasn't seen much at all, apart from the few people you might have tested it with. And then this sort of this tree trunk emerges above, and the world can start to see a website. And I call it the trunk, because that's the shop. Some people might have a store, a retail store, so it can be an online or an offline part, but that's the real trunk. That's where people go to. That's where people can buy from you, and that's where you can then lay out your ingredients in the right way. So you have your what I call your propose ingredients, things you're proposing, the summary part of your sales page, your headline, and then you can move on to say you might have a problem you might have that you're solving, and then how you're solving that, and then the features, the benefits, and so on. And then you have a proof stage where you're giving people all the evidence that they need to take the risk out of their head. And then of course there's a big push stage at the end where you've got maybe a price offer or a bonus you're throwing in, or a downloadable extra when you buy this product. And those seem to be, those are the nice core sort of 3 stages to have in your trunk. So that's really important. And then you can start thinking, well, how the hell do I communicate this to people? How do I drive traffic to this website? And that's where we get to the stage of Facebook advertising. And it's very tempting to just come up with any message and just randomly put stuff out there. But I come from a strategy background, so I would happily spend a few days planning out messages and thinking what do I say? And personally, for me, I don't at the moment do paid for advertising on Facebook or LinkedIn or anything like that. I much prefer events, obviously podcast interviews. But for me, obviously still work with clients who do a lot of advertising. But for me right now, it's not where I want to go. Simply because it gets, I like the way I get clients through events and other media. But you can start planning out your messages, what you're going to say and what channels, and then set little KPIs, little metrics, and you can start collecting benchmarks every month or 2 and see whether you're doing better or not. And especially with, I suppose, Facebook advertising, you probably want to be doing it every day or 2, seeing which ads you turn on and which ads you turn off. But you need to plan that stuff out and then put money behind it, then put time behind it. And that's where you press the go button, and that's the 4th stage. And then the 5th stage is what I call is where you measure everything. So that's where your marketing messages and your seeds are scattered out into the world. And now you need to think, you've got to work out, am I reaping what I've sowed in this world? Are there any other trees out there? And, I have a very strong background in what's called marketing effectiveness. So how do you measure what works and what doesn't for your marketing? So generally you start with, what are the soft things, what are the soft metrics, like your likes, your comments, and that you might get? And those things don't have a very weak link to sales. Exactly as we're saying about engagement at the beginning, those don't have a strong link to sales. But when you think, well, how much traffic did that Facebook post would I put money behind? How much traffic did that drive to the site? And then on the site, you get the behavioral metrics. What clicks do people take? And that's the 2nd stage, which you've gone from soft attitudinal to hard behavioral ones like clicks or people walking into your store. And then how does that then link to the final one, which is sort of the business ones, the business metrics, which is all about how does that link to sales and revenue and profit. And those 3 stages, those are 3 sort of subcomponents in the 5th stage. But, you need soft, you need hard metrics, and you need real business ones. And those all link together. And then you can see what's working, what isn't, and then you adjust accordingly and then start again.
Yeah, which is a great approach. I really like that. I mean, the science of marketing is around having a system that is always evolving based on what you're learning from doing it and what you're learning from those measures that you mentioned. So, yeah, that's really great. Now, one of the things, you talked a little bit about advertising on Facebook. One of the things I'm noticing, Facebook seems to have gone through this phase where maybe 5 years ago it was just a place where you caught up with your friends, what they were doing on their latest vacation, or, some people were posting food things on there, or, the one that always makes me laugh is when, a husband and wife congratulate one another on their wedding anniversary. And I figure, what sort of relationship is that if you can't do that in person, if you have to use Facebook to do that? But anyway, from that kind of medium to, and I think part of this was groups. When groups became really popular, it started to become a lot more of a business tool, and so the advertising started to make a lot more sense there from a marketer's point of view, helping people sell there. But now it seems to have just gotten so noisy. It seems to be all over the shop. So there's groups for God knows what, and I spend less and less time on Facebook now, because when I go in there, it's just like, oh, where do I go now? There's too much noise, too much distraction. So what's your thoughts on that? And how do you stand out if you do spend time advertising on Facebook and spend money advertising there?
Yeah, of course, that's a very good question. I mean, the first thing I'll probably say is that I suppose with things like, say, Facebook advertising or display, the more noisy something gets, there's a difference between creating noise and sending the right signal. So, if you were, say, a big investment bank, say you're, I don't know, a Merrill Lynch, if you had $1 million, would you spend that $1 million on display advertising or Facebook advertising, or would you spend it on double page spreads in one of the leading paper that all their audience might read?
That's right.
Because the signal you send is so much stronger. And I think this is actually, you're quite right. What I was saying earlier on is that the reason I'm not currently looking to use Facebook or LinkedIn for paid for advertising is because I don't think it sends the right signal. I'm sure I can get clicks and customers like that, but I'm not sure they're necessarily the customers I enjoy working with. When you read some of the comments and reviews from some people, but I think it's the signal for me. I don't think it's less and less the signal's becoming good. It doesn't say this guy's a premium brand seller with a lot of experience. It says this guy's got a get rich quick course or something like that, and that's why he's advertising, because everyone else does. And it's just become, and you're getting into that noise, and noise isn't always good. There are a lot of very loud people out there. I'm not a loud person. I'm quite very thoughtful, quite considered, and I like to make sure I give the best advice I can. But I'm not a loud person. I think Facebook is very much like that. LinkedIn is starting to become like that. And I mean, for me, it's not a big thing. But if you do want to stand out, yes, of course. I mean, it's it's the old adage of testing. Split testing is a very good way of doing it. I mean, if I think of brands or companies, especially in the consultancy world, who are doing well. I mean, you can do very well off these, these sort of these ads where it's highly persuasive copy that pushes you to a landing page with a pushy selling and then a pushy sales call afterwards. Businesses can grow well. I don't know what the repeat customers are like. I've heard they're not too hot from a couple of anecdotal sources. There's nothing scientific there, so I might be wrong. But I haven't heard great reviews about getting consistent customers and sustainable businesses. But that is a very good route. I think I'm also slightly wary of Facebook's video metrics as well. I know that came out a few months back about how misreports about how Facebook is reporting on video metrics, and I was looking at. I'm very interested in kind of how successful actually TV, believe it or not, is, and how digital and Facebook isn't sort of stopping people watching television or Netflix. People are pretty much watching it. It's very boring when you look at the proper data behind it. It's actually from, I think it's at the IAB in Australia. I was looking at it, but the number of charts basically showing that over time, TV viewing behavior is pretty stable, and people do actually watch ads through to completion. And I think it's about 33% when I was looking at it. But when I looked at Facebook completion of videos, it was about 0.66%. And that's a different story from the metrics I've read on a few clients' reports. And when I look at what's in the news about misreporting of video metrics on Facebook ads, I'm thinking it's not quite adding up. And either Facebook's inflating it, which seems to be the way, or these wonderful universities are starting to misreport what they're finding in their own studies. So I'm just generally skeptical about the noise that's out there. And I think you can win. You can do pushy sort of, stuff to drive people to sites. You can do fantastic videos with great creative. You can do wonderful copy. I don't think those principles are a really strong message with a great idea executed well, so just consistent. And you can still do that. But I'm just becoming more and more dubious. And I don't, obviously clients want to do it and they're getting the results they need from it. And of course we'll help them through that. But from a personal point of view, I'm just finding more effective ways of doing things.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly your message of consistency and being in it for the long haul in terms of building a sustainable business and also building a sustainable customer base that are customers for a long time rather than just in and out. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the trends around is these membership sites, paid membership sites or paid courses. And if you read up on all the advice that is out there to set these ones up, then the one big issue that you should be worried about when you're setting all these things up is churn. And yet their whole advertising model is like the one you described earlier. It's a, get rich quick type thing where you think that churn would be much higher.
Yeah. But it's also quite stressful when you have people leaving quite quickly, because you suddenly have to market even harder. And it suggests that the product isn't quite right. It's not delivering, or the price is too high. Yeah. And, I think when I started out, there was a certain get rich quick guy who I was very tempted by. And I abandoned it at the last minute. I actually almost fell for it. And I thought something's wrong here. And the customers I tend to attract, it's a bit like, when you're at school and then there's, I don't know, say there's a girl you like or find attractive who ends up going out with a guy who's, I don't know, he's on the rugby team or whatever it might be. And, he's not a nice person or anything like that. But then, sort of a few months later, they meet you and actually realize that you're the nice person and actually you're the one to go out with. And actually that's the relationship that lasts. Those are the sort of customers I meet. Those who have unfortunately been stung by people who, I was speaking to a lady on the phone a couple of months ago, and she was just saying that, I pay for an hour of somebody's marketing advice, and then all I got was just pushy upsell afterwards. And she said, I didn't even get the complete advice. And this happens consistently. And I think that's just wrong. I mean, I've worked for I don't know, Coca-Cola's or Honda's, TaylorMade, Adidas, Golf. I've worked for some big brands. And if you just sold somebody an hour's worth of advice and they felt it was incomplete, and you hadn't delivered, you just simply won't get that business. And this is where my rage comes in, because I just don't think people should be allowed to get away with it, but they do. So this is where my opportunity is then to actually say, I have some, I don't believe in that. And, you should give people what they pay for, and obviously a little bit more as well, because it's just important, and it makes you feel good as well. So,
yeah. All right. Well, I could keep talking marketing with you for hours, but I'm respectful of your time, and it's getting on a little bit. So I'd like to move on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So hopefully there's 5 questions. Hopefully we'll get some really short, insightful answers that will inspire the audience to go and do something awesome today. Great. So what's the number one thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
For me, I'm going to go back to the rage. I'm going to go back to the rage. What is it that annoys you? And then work it out from there, but always go back to that.
Yeah, that's good. And I really like that, as I said at the time. So great answer. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Gosh, that's a very good question. I'm just trying to be fast about this. Honestly, the best thing I've done is really boring. Is yes, you start at the rage, but I always talk to people, and I look at a few websites, but I just talk to people. I love talking to people, but they just say stuff I could never have dreamt of. And a 37-minute walk, and this
Okay.
I highly recommend. I found that I've timed this 2 or 3 times. It comes in about 37 minutes. If you going for a walk for about 37 minutes, download your head, you get a bit of headspace, and then some ideas start popping in the last like 15 or so minutes. But yes, I'd also recommend that.
Okay, 37 minutes. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm a keen cyclist. I usually go out during the week, first thing in the morning for about an hour and 5 minutes is my ride time. So I usually get heaps of ideas there if I'm on my own and not having a chat with somebody else.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually checked to see at what time the ideas start popping into my head, whether it's 37 minutes or what. All right. Do you have a favourite resource that you use most often?
Gosh, I actually have 3. So I have Sean D'Souza from Psychotactics, highly recommended. I have the Institute for Practitioners for Advertising, highly recommended, and also there's the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. And if I can throw Mark Ritson as well, I would add that in too.
Okay, great. Well, we have links to those in the show notes as well for people to check out further. What's the best way to keep a project or a client on track?
Gosh, that's a good point. Starting by announcing a date you're going live. So right at the start, say I'm going live on this date, and then you put it out there to your customers and to people who are listening. You feel compelled to meet that deadline. So yeah, I've got a community going live in a few weeks time, and I've put the deadline as 28th of Feb. It's just really pushing me to finish the sales page.
Yeah,
today and tomorrow. So yeah.
Yeah, that really is a good one. I've done the same I've got a new podcast launching. I haven't set an exact date. I was hoping to get it done by the end of January, but I've had a couple of things come up, so it's nearly ready to go live. It's all set up. But yeah, I did announce it. I did do some promo videos, so people are looking for it, which keeps me on track. Okay, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Wow, that's a very good question. For me, when you speak to a client and you ask what is the result that you get from me, you tend to get something that's quite different from what you thought. And so I have a sort of a one-to-one sort of mini coaching business that's run pretty much online by email and the odd face-to-face. And for me, it was this idea of personal, frequent attention. And I hadn't thought of that before. But when I read the feedback from clients about the results they were getting from me and that they really liked, it was that. But yeah, again, it's coming back to talking to customers, you get something that's really great. But also there is another way to get great differentiation is just to simply list everything out that your service or your product might actually do. And then you just choose a thing that excites you the most and excites customers the most and go with that. So that's a nice way.
Yeah, well, I like there's definitely a customer focus there and getting feedback from the customers as to what they value and then talking to them about changes you've made for them. Yeah. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the big things actually on this interview has been really great is that, that often on a lot of podcasts there's a lot of buzz terminologies and, that's used. But I think that more and more, I think things are shifting back to the fact that things are now becoming you have to be very sensible when you're offering marketing advice. It is, I think, we've had a lot of buzz, and actually, when it comes back to it, it's always the core things: a great product, great marketing, and always talking to your customers. So that's almost a mini realization I've had on this. Yeah, back to basics.
All right. Well, thanks, Simon. This has been really fabulous. I've really enjoyed this and learned a lot more about your 5-stage system and the Teoko tree. So I encourage people to check out your book and find out more about the tree and also how it's a metaphor for your 5-stage marketing plan. Now, where can people actually find that book and reach out and say thank you to you for what you shared today?
Thank you. Well, if they go to thebrainwheel.com, so that's brain as in thebrainwheel.com, and you can search under books, you can sign up to the to the newsletter. You get a very good report from it as well, which is all about how to write the opening 5 lines for your website so customers don't bounce immediately. So I'd also recommend that, or just send me an email at simon@thebrainwheel.com.
All right, we'll have all of those links in the show notes as well, so people can just click through and find you easily. Now, what's the number one piece of advice you'd give to any business owner who wants to be a leader in innovation and in their field?
Honestly, gosh, that's a very good question. I think the number one piece of advice is start 10 years before you want to get there. The 10-year overnight success, I think it is. It's very painful. I do think that writing a book and then spending a lot of time promoting it can get you very far. You can often spend a lot of your time doing that promotion, not actually doing anything more than that. But I think that can really get you to good places. And there are certain businesses like Dent Global that I think make entrepreneurs who want to be famous more famous. So yes, you can take those sorts of routes.
Okay,
but yeah,
I think since you're using a tree as a metaphor, I don't know who said this. It's probably been around for ages. But what was it? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today.
Yeah, that's really
10
nice.
years ago, or 5,950 years ago, 9,950 years ago.
That's very nice. Yeah, I like the way it's all come back to trees as well.
Yeah. All right, then. Finally, Simon, who would you like me to interview on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Gosh, that's a very good question. So I would also go back to the people I recommended at the start. I think Sean D'Souza from Psychotactics is a wonderful man. He knows an extraordinary amount, so I'd certainly recommend him. There is another chap whose name actually I'm going to have to pass because he's very good, but I can't remember his surname. He wrote a book called The Art of the Click, and he's called Glenn. But he's launched his own new podcast. I don't know the guy personally, but I've listened to it. It's very good, and his book is also extremely good too. So yes,
right. Well, we might get the details of The Art of the Click and Glenn from you, and Sean D'Souza will get an introduction from you if you know him, and we'll get them on the podcast.
Superb.
Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us today on the InnovaBuzz podcast, Simon. I've really enjoyed this. I've kind of learnt a lot more as to your structure and how it contrasts to the structure that we have, but certainly been reinforced in the idea that structure and science around marketing are definitely the way to go, and human interaction and listening to customers is fundamental to good marketing. So thanks for sharing all of that with us today, and I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a really great chat. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful and thought-provoking conversation with Simon, and like me, learnt a lot. Simon's approach to marketing is clearly evidence-based and scientific. I loved the Teoko tree metaphor and the structure in his marketing process, and of course the human factor. Talking to customers and understanding customers is something that really resonates well with me. There was so much more, though, in that interview with Simon, so I'd love to know what you took away from this episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which can be found at innovabiz.co/Simon Lamey. That is SIMONLAMEY. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Simon Lamey. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Simon there, as well as links to the Brainwheel website and the Science of Getting Chosen book and the resources that we spoke about. Simon suggested I interview Sean D'Souza of Psychotactics on a future InnovaBuzz podcast. So Sean, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Simon Lamey. Remember to visit innovabiz.co/VIP to access the Transformational Marketing Hub and all its free and exceptionally useful information to help you transform your marketing. And tune in again next week. We've got more fantastic guests lined up, including Harry Duran of Podcast Junkies and Gigi Rosenberg, a public speaking and presentation coach. Stay connected. Subscribe to the InnovaBuzz podcast so you'll make sure you'll never miss another episode. Head on over to innovabiz.co/subscribe. We'd also love you to leave us a review because what you think matters to us. Take some of the ideas you've heard today and apply them in your business. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions or questions, then share them in the comments below the blog post. And remember, if you want to get better marketing results than you ever have, join our fantastic Facebook community at the Tales of Marketing Transformation Facebook group. All you have to do is go to innovabiz.co/TMA. It's free to join. I hope to see you there soon. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember to be awesome and keep innovating.